be pleasing and acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our rock, our Redeemer, the one who calls us to endure. Amen. The title of my sermon this morning is The Long Road. The long road, but the good road. Faith is the long road. Faith is the long, long road that is a good road. The book of Hebrews, our second lesson, is about encouraging a community that is tempted to lose hope and to grow weary, reminding them of the good road that they travel on in the faith of many ancestors. And so placing before them the memory of so many who lived and died in faith, even though they didn't receive everything they hoped for in this life, that the community now would feel encouraged that they are in good company on a long road, but a good road. To illustrate this story, I want to turn to an example from a folk ballad. This folk ballad happened to touch my heart when I first heard it, and I believe it can unpack the depth of the book of Hebrews for us today. It's a folk ballad from the 1800s. It's about a poor man who's been on a long, bumpy road, and he's ended up at a railway station in a town by a lakeshore. We don't know what the long road is that brought him there, whether it was military service or immigration from Europe, but he doesn't know anybody in the town that he showed up, which happens to be New Orleans, and he doesn't have any money. The money that he does have in his pocket, as little as it is the wrong kind of currency. And so what will happen? What kind of hope will there be on this long road? Now, as it turns out, at this railway station, there is a very attractive young woman of French Louisiana Creole descent who happens to take an interest in this young stranger. She greets him, takes her hat off, and he takes his hat off in a bow and complains that he has no money in this place and that if it weren't for the alligators out in the woods, he'd sleep there at night. And she says, "You're welcome to come with me to my mother's house. We are simple people, but we are hospitable people, and we will have a meal for you." And so the young man greets this as very happy news on the journey, a very welcome turn of events. And quite naturally, his heart begins to go further with the ideas of who this girl might be and what kind of future they might have together. Our gospel reading in Luke, "Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Where your heart goes, this is what you value." Sometimes our hearts lead us in directions we didn't plan to go. Anyway, back to the cabin in the lakeshore. As the evening goes on, the man is swept up in feeling courage in front of the mother and the daughter, and he likes very much their home and their company. And he works up an act of great boldness and says, "Will you marry me?" practically bursting it out to the daughter. And she says, "I can't. There's someone else. He's not here. Someone else far away, a sailor at sea. And I've pledged myself to wait for him faithfully." And yes, it's been many, many, many months out at sea. We don't know if he'll come back, but my prayer is he will, and I've set my heart to be faithful to him. And so for the stranger who has had his heart set on where this journey was taking him, on who he was meeting, on this young woman, it's a moment of disappointment. It's a moment of dashed hearts, dashed hopes. But if there's tears and choking back surprise at the news that he receives, the goodness of what she stands for, of staying faithful to someone else on a long journey far away, moves his heart. He's no longer bitter or disappointed. He's thankful. And so the ballad ends. I'll read it first and then I'll sing it for you. "Fare ye well, my bonny old girl. I will see you nevermore, but I won't forget your kindness on the shore, and at every social gathering, a flowing glass I'll raise, and I'll bid a toast to my Creole girl and the Lakes of Pontchartrain. Fare ye well, my bonny old girl, I shall see you nevermore. I won't forget your kindness in that cottage by the shore. At every social gathering, a flowing glass I'll raise, and I'll bid a toast to the Creole girl and the Lakes of Pontchartrain. The verses in our second reading today from the book of Hebrews about faith may be at first puzzling. Faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. And for you and I as listeners who are used to receiving news critically and wanting to scrutinize it for solid evidence, what are we left with for taking in faith and the book of Hebrews' exhortation to us to have faith? The verses continue, not by solving the puzzle of how you can be certain of something you can't see, but by telling a story. So that when Abraham and Sarah, not believing that they didn't have any future, when they received a promise from God that there would be a great nation that would come from them, two old people with no children, they lived out their lives and they died with faith in that promise, and because they stayed true to what they could not see yet. The church was there today in the book of Hebrews to remember them and how they had faith in what they could not yet see, because God made the long journey of faith a good road. The book of Hebrews continues in a most moving phrase. The ancestors died in faith without having received the promises, but from a distance they saw them and greeted them. That puts more heart into the definition of faith, doesn't it? The first definition, faith is the assurance of what you can't see, the certainty of what there isn't evidence for. But then Hebrews continues, from a distance, greeting and welcoming. A little bit like the stranger who at first is embittered that the girl turns him down in that cabin, but then he realizes there's someone else far away that he didn't see. And his heart's filled with gratitude for what she stands for and her faithfulness. And then his heart overflows so that he says, I will share a toast everywhere I go with this story. And so for this secular folk ballad, we are left with the church community, hearing the words of the book of Hebrews taking us to a similar place. That even in one moment, on one step in the journey, when you're left frustrated, feeling discouraged, defeated, or wiping away tears in one moment, having faith looks like seeing through those tears, seeing through to what you can't yet see, even greeting it now, that God will make the road good because God will hold true to the promise that held up Abraham and Sarah, that held up John the Baptist, that held up Jesus and the disciples, that held up the early church, that held up Martin Luther, that held up our own ancestors of faith who created this church. What is the promise for you? That God is not ashamed to be your God, that exactly when you would feel like giving up or feeling defeated or empty, God will raise you up with all those saints who have walked the way with Jesus Christ, and the future generations that are not yet seen but are worth staying true to the path for their sake. It's seeing who's here with us now and valuing them, who's been here before and left memories that we carry, and who may yet come that we don't see now. God does not leave us in the company of all these ancestors and future generations, but promises that the road of faith is a long road, but a good road. Thanks be to God.